Welcome to the 101 Ways podcast. This is us giving back to the tech community. And with 101 ways to solve a problem, we hope you'll find the right expertise here to help solve yours. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and the others to keep up to date. And most importantly, this is our first Team Takeover episode. So this is where the 101 Ways team debate a hot topic. I'm Ollie Happy, Product Principal, and this week I'm joined by Anikh Subhan, who is Delivery Principal, and Ray Parkar, who is Engineering Principal. So today's topic is Modernising the Monolith. I got it right that time. And thanks to Ray for talking us through it. Thank you to you both for being here, and handing over to you, Ray.
The textbook definition of monolith, in my opinion, is that it's a single application. It's designed to be run, maintained, updated as a single service. It works up and down the stack, from presentation to the database layer to even integrating with other services, external third parties, etc. It has loads of advantages and disadvantages that I'm sure we'll debate as we go through this, but quite simply, it can be very performant. It's all in a centralized code base. It can be easier to test. You are testing one single unit. It can be easier to actually develop, especially when you're starting out, because it's all just in one place. There's some real positives, but as it grows and as a business grows, you can find it start to become a bottleneck. You can find it start to slow development speed, or start to make it harder to adopt new technologies, because you have to make a change across the entire monolith as you go through. And modernizing, if we go to the dictionary definition of modernizing, which is the process of updating something to make it work in a contemporary setting. The kind of classic examples are putting new computers in an office, putting in high-speed internet, getting a really fancy new espresso machine, which I know some people will very much appreciate. Applying that to monoliths and applying that definition really comes down to how can you take your monolithic application that you may have started with, that you may have grown with, and make it fit for purpose in today's world of your business, whether that be because you're growing and scaling and coming into new problems, or whether that be because internally your team is scaling and you're wanting to work on more things in parallel without all crossing streams and getting in each other's way. That's where I probably set the good definitions going, and look at my two friends, Ollie and Anikh, and see if they have anything to add.
Go on, Anikh. What do you think listening to that?
I think it's a good summary of what that entails. I think as we go into some of the signs that you need to modernize, that'll help sort of flesh out what that looks like and what that definition is, because a monolith can be, comprised of so many different facets that's holding it back in terms of what you can do with it technically, from a product perspective, from a delivery mechanism and framework perspective, because as we know, when we think about agile ways of working and more modern ways of working, technical excellence is a principle that I think underpins the ability to work in an agile way and be rapid and be able to adapt the products and the tech stack as often as needed and as possible. So I think you summed it up nicely, but that's my view from a delivery side.
Nice. And from a product perspective, I would say any kind of tech debt, tech stack need to rebuild or refactor or replatform or remodernize discussion is something that we hope won't happen very often, because really we're focused on what do our business goals look like for the year, for the quarter. What have we learned about the competition? What have we learned about what we put out last quarter, and what do we want to achieve? So I think that this topic is often something that the rest of the business doesn't really want to hear, and therefore might kick the can down the road on.
I think on that point, just briefly, and it might be an interesting discussion, is modernizing, I think, is a very large term. And actually, there's a real point of modernization, which is how much can you iterate on what you have and make it better as you're going, so that you're not affecting those business goals, those overall goals. I think we when you look at a monolith, you tend to expect, especially over the last few years, that there is almost an endpoint where you will outgrow your monolith and you will need to do something to make it better. But can you do that slowly, surely, while you're not affecting the business goals, is a question you should probably always be asking. And that comes back to something that both of you, I'm sure, know of, which is how do we deal with tech debt as it comes up?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and something I've sort of seen that works well is I think a couple of different aspects of that. One is ensuring the product owner and the business, the product representative that's part of the team, is fully across the context of the sort of health of the tech stack. So the place that we're at, but also the roadmap and the vision for the technology framework that's being used is really interesting, because then the product owner or likewise can prioritize accordingly and take those technical debt and those technical improvements into account, because that then means that you can do those piecemeal, piece by piece, and they are baked into and almost as part of new product development and new feature development, meaning that you are continuously iterating and improving the technology behind the product, not just building new features and new functionality, on top. So for me, it's a couple of things there. It's that baking that into the ongoing delivery and development, but also making sure that the product owner is very clear and is able to understand the impact of not doing some of that stuff, and the benefit of doing some of that stuff regularly as you go.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Because there's and I guess that's kind of what I was getting to also, that there's this desire sometimes to focus on the exciting, valuable feature side of things and not think about the ever-present health of the stack. I think that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, I guess it's always easy to get sucked into new features and get sucked into what we can do to grow and all the fun,
It's never happened
stuff.
to me. Wouldn't know.
Yeah, it's certainly not in a product manager's usual gift to just be thinking about what we can do next. But it's probably a good time to have a moment, and I'll start because I find it interesting as to why modernize, why take your tech stack, why take it forward, what the kind of signs are from my perspective of this isn't working, I guess, is ultimately the kind of end goal of that conversation. Is most like the biggest one for me, and I think this will probably really hit hard with both of you, is that you can't actually release the software you want as quickly as you want to. You end up it hangs around. It takes weeks or months to get something out the door. You're just not able to deploy continuously or have that continuous improvement to the service, because it takes a long time to test, or it takes a long time to go through, or there are so many interdependencies that it all gets stuck in a big testing cycle, for instance. That's usually probably the biggest one for me that goes, hey, what's going wrong here? I'd love to get a view of what that looks like from a delivery perspective, actually, because that's probably something that you guys sort of track and look at. It's hard. Like for me, it's DORA metrics or a little bit of like release and cycle time and release frequency. But what does that look like from a delivery perspective, and what are the frustrations that come with it?
Yeah, totally. I think it's a really valid point. When you're looking at the releases, you're just looking at sort of the regularity and the cadence of which you're releasing software, and you can get a gut feel for when things are taking too long, when you should be able to release something that could be a simple feature or a straightforward piece of work that actually is getting blocked on stuff. And you mentioned, the sort of top level challenge there is not being able to release software as quickly as you want. Below that, there could be a whole host of reasons. It could be that there's a lot more dependencies being introduced. Teams are heavily reliant on other teams or other sort of platforms. Work's getting blocked more often. So again, due to those dependencies or other things, such as dependency on an external source or other resources that are needed for the team that they just don't have access to because of the state of the technology. And maybe then there's also changes to code that are just being more difficult to make and deploy without breaking other things. and the tech stack becoming a bit more brittle to manage. And these are all signs, from just from generally, but both from a tech and delivery, perspective, when you're working on a product or a platform, that these are big indicators that actually there's some investment needed into the health of the tech stack to make sure that these things are resolved. Because when you're thinking about getting software out the door, typically the challenges should be around the build of it and getting it ready, but the actual pipeline of getting it tested, deployed, and shipped, that needs to be invested in up front to make sure that that pipeline is as smooth and as quick as possible, aiming for those CI and CD type based pipelines and platforms. So for me, it's just really keeping an eye on the regularity and the cadence of those releases, the amount of work that can be done independently, and the sort of cycle time that's associated with features being built from sort of start to finish.
Yeah.
And I get
Okay.
go on. We're all so polite here. So I was just going to say, on the product side, let the Antipodean go first. Take the reins, as it were. So on the product side, it's all of those things, Anikh. But I think, as you were saying, Ray, at times product can be a bit of a strategic ivory tower. And if I think of the things that cause me to step outside, it's, we're not going to be able to hit this target deadline, or the date that's been suggested and proposed by the leadership team is just way out. And even if we throw people at the problem, we're not going to reach it, because it turns out there's something going on back there, right? And then beneath that surface, it's all of the things that, Anikh, you've just outlined. And I think what's really important is the way I think about it is that a tech estate does become quite complex, even if the application that's being served up to customers or internal users is very simple and very streamlined and very modern. There's still other factors at play. You might have Salesforce, you might have ServiceNow, you might have dashboards that are coming off it. There's going to be a lot going on. And if we think about it as a car, of course you would service the car. If you didn't service the car, you wouldn't complain if the car stops, right? Like if you put petrol in a diesel or something like that. So I often find myself talking to senior technical folks and saying, or even some of the QAs or some of the devs on a squad, who will say, you do realize that this is a problem and it's going to have these consequences. And I remind myself, this is just servicing the car. There's always got to be an element of maintenance and business as usual in any planning exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to add, when things are taking longer and you've got a deadline that's not going to be met, as you said, Ollie, a really good example, is when those delivery estimates from teams become much larger, but more, not just because the complexity of the work, but more because of the unknowns associated with it and the complexity within that due to the technical estate either being out of date or being areas of it not being touched for a long time, or just the team knowing that there's areas that are going to break and fall over if we touch it. So it's going to take a lot longer to unpick those areas. So it's kind of the known unknowns, but also the unknowns based on the condition of the technical estate.
Yeah, nicely put. Back to you, Ray.
Yeah, no, that's you've almost taken my tech piece away there, because that's all of the tech, a lot of the tech.
Sorry, I stole your thunder.
That's okay. I'll take it. But I want to go back a little bit. When you were kind of talking through some of the delivery problems, and actually I'd love to get both your takes here, is one of the things I think sometimes in engineering that I see and feel is that engineering is and the structure of engineering teams and organizations is a response to creating more features, to creating more value streams, to parallelizing effort, right? And one of the things, once you have a monolith, and if you've built a monolith from a technical perspective, the more teams and the more separation you create in that, I tend to see a bigger problem in managing those cross-team dependencies. Is you're all working in one code base, you're all potentially breaking things that other teams are doing. And actually, from an organization design perspective, I'd love to know kind of why, from a product perspective, you look to parallelize value streams, or what that kind of looks like. But ultimately, I find there is a real conversation that you probably need to have with yourself when you're designing that, both from a technical perspective and from a product and delivery perspective, which is, do you anticipate chasing multiple streams of value at once, or are you happy prioritizing? Because the more teams you introduce to a monolith, the more communication that needs to happen between them, and the more well set up your organization needs to be for that, because that's typically a bit of a falling point. But I guess from a to ping over to Ollie, what does it look like from a product perspective when you're trying, I guess, to manage multiple streams or manage multiple opportunities?
Good question. It makes me want to take a step back and say perhaps something that's been really healthy to me is, and time spent with particularly engineering leads, is understanding that everything is built for a reason, and that even the things that we have today that are not ideal and perhaps are not enjoyed by those that are working on the monolith, they got there for a reason. And it was a thing that was fitting at the time. So if we think about the monolith, we think about a startup, a couple of people in a room with an idea, or a team within a larger business that's incubating an idea or building something new. Generally, what they'll be wanting to do is build as quickly as possible to a point where they can validate an idea, right? And of course, monoliths are a really fast way to build, and particularly for one or two people to build, right? And then if we fast forward a bit to a stage where, like you say, the product team and being asked to parallelize or find a way for a number of teams to achieve a number of things in a set time frame, of course, then it no longer works to have multiple squads touching the same code, right? So, and of course, that's a great time to break things out into microservices, and of course, there's back end and front end ways to do that, and both are important. So, coming back to your question, then, as a product person, I think it's often easy to feel almost defeated by the enormity of the restrictions of the monolith. You know, that I'll give you an example. The conversation often goes something like, right, so we've got these goals. We know that we need to add this half dozen features to our V1 platform. We could call it a V2 platform. How are we going to get there? Why is it taking so long, to your point? Excuse me, Anikh. Why are the estimations coming back so high? Why are people uncertain of how long it will take to achieve these 5 things in this next 6 months? And often folks will come back and say, look, you've got a couple of options. We're either going to have to down tools and start again, or we're going to have to kick the can down the road. And I've seen both of those, and I feel a bit guilty about the times that tech debt and even things such as teams being able to take the time to write unit tests get put to one side because we've just got to get there. So I think often it's easy to feel quite disempowered and uncertain how to proceed. And the only thing that has saved me personally each time is sitting down with the team, starting with whoever I'm paired with, so folks like yourselves at the senior level, and then looking for folks in the team who have strong opinions and are passionate, and looking for where the problems lie. And I know we'll come on to ways to modernize and the different approaches to doing that. What about you, Anikh?
Yeah, just on that, you're just going back to that question, Ray, about org structure and sort of the root cause there. I think that is a real root cause for some of the problems that Ollie was just describing there. You know, when you've got an organizational structure where there's no clear ownership around areas of the tech estate, and we've seen this quite a few times with some of the clients we've worked with, but yeah, there's environments where through no fault, just through building up of the teams and people and work, more teams are added, more teams are more output focused rather than outcome focused. And there's no real clear area owners for areas of the technical estate, meaning that teams will focus on what they need to build and what they need to deliver. But there's areas of technical estate which are unloved, not looked at, not sort of looked after and maintained. But on top of that, for some of the problem areas, there's just sticky plasters put on top of those to make sure that a team can do the job they need to do, but the technical infrastructure underneath it, or the architecture underneath it, is supporting what they need to do, but is not necessarily improved and evolved as it should be because it doesn't have a clear owner. And that's where sort of a clear team structure and sort of ownership and accountabilities and responsibilities is needed, and a combination potentially of, depending on the context, but a combination of value based and structured teams around outcomes, as well as an element of platform or API type based teams who are looking after certain elements of that technical estate. Again, depending on the context, one may be better than the other, one may be more important or widespread than the other, or you may need a combination of both. But that then allows clear ownership around some of those areas that are less customer facing, that needs still that maintenance and love from behind the scenes, but then a focus on value and outcomes from a team and a product sort of perspective. But yeah, that's my take on it. I don't know what you guys have sort of experienced with some of those scenarios.
Yeah, so that's really that's a really good point actually. So interesting, isn't it, to talk about the state of the tech perhaps no longer being suitable to the goals of the organization and perhaps being limiting. That's obviously one side of it, but the other side is the way that we organize ourselves as a group of people to get things done. So the operating structure of our teams. And of course, it makes sense that if a monolith is perhaps 2 years old or 4 years old or longer, perhaps the teams haven't changed in that time, right? And maybe just before I pass back to you, Ray, so I would reflect on that also as what is driving the organization? You know, what type of a what is driving our decision making? And you know, you'd be familiar with the different types of teams, but back in the day, in the 90s and noughties, we had a lot of sales-led organizations. So being led by the next big deal, particularly a situation for businesses that have a smaller number of larger customers. There's folks that are project-led. So we've just got to get this project done. There are businesses that are tech-led in the sense that our technology is what gets us there. So, you know, OpenAI could be seen to be tech-led right now because GPT-4 and 4.5 and so on is what they build their business on. It'd be very easy for their entire strategy to become based around the technology that they're building. It's very common to see feature-led teams, and I think you've just touched on that, Anikh, in terms of teams that are set up to achieve feature-led goals. We just need to ship this feature to that audience. And then there will be some businesses that, in the more sort of vogue language of today, are more product-led. And I think that's encapsulated by what you were saying around teams that are value-led. I also see things, and maybe it's because I'm getting quite old, but I also see things as going in stages. You know, like I remember in the 90s, folks would say, you can't really lead a business unless you're an accountant, because that's where businesses were. You could say they were finance-led. And then more recently, there's been an era of CTO founders, and there's an emerging sense of product founders. But product-led is value-led. It's not product manager-led, right? I think that's really important here. And the point really is that there are different motivations that drive the objectives of a business, and it's worth considering those, as well as the way we structure our teams, as well as the technology we have today.
Yeah, it's all a it's all a combination, and I think this kind of, the more we talk about this, the more you see, right? It's a combination of product engineering and delivery all coming together to get this right. Because you know, to your points earlier where you talked about how talking to engineers, and you see we've got here for a reason, and now we have something, you know, potentially a monolith that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I've seen some that are 16, 17 years old. Now you've got there for a lot of reasons, and actually understanding that and pairing up that coherent contingent is what's going to drive something forward. Engineering can't just make decisions in black boxes, nor can product, nor can delivery, because it just doesn't work. It leads you to well, it leads you to bad places. It leads you to where you need to back things out again and go again, or it leads you to debt, or it leads you to solutions that aren't quite right. So there's a lot there. I guess it's all coming for me. I'm interested because I'm getting into a few things for me. Is like we talked about making some decisions or taking some actions that we don't, whether we don't do unit tests, we don't do the right amount of testing, we need to get something out the door and we need to keep moving. And I think there's two things in place for modernizing that you need to have. You need to have your standards. There are things that you can't break no matter what you're doing. And even as you're moving forward, creating features or starting to modernize. And there are strategies, right? Of how are we going to modernize and how are we going to, over a long term, make that successful? Because it's really easy to start modernizing. It's really easy to start changing. It's really easy to go, let's break this monolith down, for instance. Let's start going to a microservice approach, for instance. Let's build, lots of teams, lots of independent autonomous teams. And a few months in, say this isn't quite reaping the results we want it to, and back that out. And all that does is leave you in a worse position than you actually started in. Those long-term strategies are long-term, and you do have to take those and run with them and accept that, start defining that end goal, start defining what success looks like, and ensure you're still iterating towards it and pivot when necessary, but stay the course to at least see what the results look like. I think, especially in the last few years, it's been really easy to pivot in lots of directions, especially where, interestingly, I've been reading more about this, but where zero interest and where money has been accessible, and it's really easy to hyper grow. And microservices kind of came out of a hyper growth period of the world, right? And you can continually pivot, but as one of the challenges I think we're seeing with businesses is that budgets are getting tighter, and that's true of the world and for all of us in the cost of living as well. That actually we need to be more measured, and you need to have strategies, and you need to take those gambles in modernizing that are going to pay off. And you can't just pivot every 3 months, because it just leaves you in worse places than you started. Love to. I think I've just ranted for a bit, but I'd love to get your thoughts, either of you, on any of that, if any of that resonates, even.
Go on, Anikh.
I always love one of your rants, Ray. So don't mind that. Yeah, absolutely. I think sort of just to touch on that and taking it's sort of another level down in terms of the structure and some of those symptoms. You can get to a point where teams are over reliant on individuals who've been there for a long time. You mentioned like the number of years you've seen some of the technical estates that you've worked on and the monoliths that you've had to deal with and manage. You can have team members in there who are the single points of failure because they're the only ones with the knowledge of that monolith because they've been there the longest. That is a huge bottleneck for teams, as you know. And going back to our points earlier on around bottlenecks and blockers and challenges with delivery, that's a big sort of red flag, if you like, of the need to engage and embark on a modernizing journey. And you mentioned sort of it's a long game. I think that applies to any change or transformation, whether it's process ways of working or more technology, or sort of more people focused. There's a long-term strategy and plan here, and you've got to stay the course. It's not we're going to be modernized by next Monday. It's obviously, but it's going to be we need to be modernized to an extent to this point, and you've got to define that criteria in the context of your organization by this point, which means at that point we can then switch into more of an ongoing continuous improvement type model to bake in that technical change into our feature delivery like we talked about earlier. So I think for me it's just about defining that criteria and getting those goals and those sort of ambitions clear and well understood and communicated out widely to the teams, so they can all help go on that journey to that point where it then becomes part of the sort of baked into the process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It must seem to people like we never disagree. This is us at our polite best, right?
I'll take one. If we could modernize by next Monday, that'd be great.
Yeah,
If
I
we
mean,
can do
it's
that.
episode one. It's episode one, right? So yeah, I'm sure we're gonna have some disagreements in the ones coming up.
I just find that you both speak the truth so often. It's hard to disagree, you know. So yeah, I think you really hit something there, which is that it's a journey. It's not a destination. And I know that's like so many things I say these days. They seem like quotable quotes that I've read out of an ancient wisdom book or something. But the reality is that ancient wisdom is repeated for a reason, right? Because it keeps applying. And in terms of modernization, there's a change here, isn't there? I hope from from build it once, run it as long as you can, throw it away, build something else, down tools for 18. And I've often had teams come back and say, we can't build any features for 18 months because we are going to re-platform, which is the big bang approach, right? And of course, there are other ways, which we'll come to in a minute. What's really important about all of this is as we're shifting, I hope, to an idea of maintain and evolve and grow over time. And that today's step needs to fit into a broader picture. But it's as much about the culture and the ways that teams are set up and the ways that people are thinking needing to change as it is the tech stack needing to change. That makes sense.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. One of the things, we can't do anything for 18 months is the most annoying thing to me. It's a statement I will die on a hill and say that it's one of the ones that annoys me the most in my day-to-day life. I build a lot of tech. I've moved, features from old monoliths to newer microservice approaches or elsewhere, or even built upon that while improving. It doesn't work in today's world, really, especially given every sector seems to have so much competition, to down tools for 18 months. By the time you get back up, you're so far behind the 8 ball. And I'm sure you can talk to that a lot more than I can, that you're fighting a losing battle. And you have to find ways of continuously improving. And you have to find ways, even if you're building new features and actually going about it and going, we're going to break this monolith apart. We're going to go down a microservice approach. We're going to look at the product strategy and we're going to go, right, we're going to have, 6 engineering teams with different focus areas on outcome led or product or product led kind of approaches. And they're
We're
going to
we're going to bring in events because events are a much better way to pub and sub. Yeah.
Events are cool, like whatever that is, you have to take that within the strategy, and that has to be pragmatic, and it has to be you have to continue delivering while you're doing that. And that means that there will be debt. That means that things will not be moved over. That means that you can actually start having this really fun discussion of, we didn't move this thing over and it's quite tricky to manage, and maybe it doesn't bring about that much revenue for us or that much value. Do we want to? That's actually a much better question to have when you're modernizing, is how much of the old tech estate is necessary as you move forward. How much can you get rid of? You'll know that engineers, especially principal engineers, really love deleting code. My favorite merge request of all time was one where I deleted 10,000 lines and added none. Deleting code is what I live for now, apparently. And so that's probably a more fun conversation to have, but it really kind of hits true that it doesn't work anymore to say that you're going to need 18 months downing tools and not doing anything. In my opinion, anyway, it's like just not cool.
And then the other side of that, Anikh, is that if the business does embark down an 18-month project to re-platform the entire estate, I'm sure that you've seen what that looks like in terms of complexity and managing that delivery and the kinds of delays and unexpected occurrences that appear along the way, right? The bigger the scope is.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the challenges we talked about earlier, just in terms of like, changes in code being difficult to make and deploy, become real problems in that instance when you've got a sort of almost a freeze on certain areas of the code. whilst work is being done there to modernize. You know, and it just kind of creates a lot of uncertainty around what's going to be able to be achieved, what's going to be able to be done based on you know, the updated and modernized technical stack. But really, it's something that you want to bake into those processes, ensure that you're not just spending you know, 18 months purely doing that, because, you know, technology is a revenue driver for businesses. It's not, you know, the shift in the world is that it's not a supporting function anymore as it was maybe considered, you know, 20 years or so ago. It's the revenue driver for businesses. So it's not possible really to be able to pause on feature work and value based sort of customer facing value based work to just focus on sort of modernization and tech improvements. Absolutely, that can be done alongside of Parallels, and loads of organizations we've seen have done that and managed that really, really effectively, where they've had teams purely focused on that modernization piece, whilst other teams are, you know, focused on you know, new product development and sort of that customer facing user facing piece. But again, that's for a period of time. That's not the end state. That's not the sort of default position. It's something that gets them to a state where they can then bring it all into one and merge it into you know, one set of work streams across a product, rather than having to manage them separately.
Yeah, and it's not surprising, considering we come from a world where businesses had an IT department which supported the business and was a cost center, I guess, to your point. And we're now moving to a world where the top performing stocks and the leading businesses are technology led, as you say. That's quite a shift in terms of the role that technology plays in a business achieving its goals, right? Have you felt that change and shift, Ray?
Definitely. It's just thinking of my words here.
This might be the longest that Ray has ever paused.
This may be the longest I'll ever pause again. As I feel off for that question. But no, I think it's definitely a change that's been felt, I think, across all three of us. Definitely a change that's been felt in tech. I think tech is all so rapidly evolving and so always evolving that it's always changing anyway. But there's a point over the last few years, 5, 10, 15, where it's really hyper grown, hyper changed. And it's probably similar for you two as well. But we've really come a long way, and as such, I think actually we're still figuring out what the best ways are. In a lot of, I think there's a lot of change in what the right way to do anything is at the moment. That maybe is just about settling down now, but certainly in about 5 years ago, there were 78 different ways to do something, and none of them were really wrong. And that's an interesting place to be in as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that you look at the number of options and databases in cloud, like it just exploded, didn't it? And it's difficult for teams to know which horse to back. I also kind of feel like cloud providers in general exploded, and I kind of feel like now that's collapsed down to the big four, and it's become easier for teams to pick a path. Ryan Greenhall, CTO, he had a great comment recently that a culture of continuous improvement is what we are really talking about here, that today's modernization efforts will become tomorrow's legacy unless there's a culture of continuous improvement to build upon it. So this is not a call to arms to run projects with clear start and end dates as it pertains to the health of the tech stack. It's more of a lifestyle change. And I think that's kind of what you're getting to, right, Anikh?
Yeah, that's resonates really well with kind of what I was thinking, and this being a mindset shift, a shift in the culture in terms of how this work is planned in and managed, you know, for teams. It's not a program of work as such. It may need to be, like I said, you know, for the start of it, but the end goal should be for it to be a that sort of embedded continuous improvement sort of technology. You know, like you're saying, we're in a world now where the sort of immediacy of stuff is expected. So for stuff to load within a second, for streaming platforms to not be buffering, for, you know, responses from services to be instantaneous. So if the technology underneath the sort of the features and the functionality is not supporting that, you're already at disadvantage without even building new features and without even iterating your feature set. You know, the basics there in terms of performance and usability for users needs to be at a certain high level of high standard now. That's just the world we're in, I think. And I think that quote you mentioned there talks to that in terms of it becoming an embedded piece of continuous improvement throughout everything that's being done.
Yeah, and you know, there's definitely, to your point, an expectation of things happening faster, isn't there? That people are now able to work async, that continuous delivery and continuous deployment means that it's no longer a deployment a month, a deployment a year. It's now perhaps 20 or 30 a day. Certainly I've seen that at times, depending on the organization. That speed of movement and speed of change can only happen in small pieces, right? And that's kind of the key, isn't it? That when folks like us come along and say, well, so your engineering team, and that's problem number one. It's never just the engineering team; it's the team. So the current business state is that it looks like it's going to take 18 months to re-platform and turn the old into the new. Well, we could probably deliver something for you in 3 months. That seems crazy, right? But they are different things, because what the organization like ours will be talking about is actually delivering the first piece on the path. Isn't it right?
Yeah, it's about kicking off, it's about getting started, and then it's about delivering that very first part of the overall vision, and then continuously improving and delivering on top of that, right? And just spending the next X months, whatever that looks like, and still probably shorter than 18, improving, delivering, and continuously kind of showing that we can make change to this kind of platform day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, rather than spending 18 months effectively treating it like a cost until you get to the point where you're benefiting from it.
Yeah. I feel like we should move on to giving folks some tips on ways to approach modernization. And I feel like you've just given us a segue in. What do you reckon?
Let's do it. I love a good segue, even if they're not intentional.
I think we've probably flogged the dead horse in terms of big bang, wholesale throwing things away is not the only way. There is a time and a place, but it's not the only way. So the business has agreed that there's a need to shift to a new way of doing things that's more continuous improvement and building in increments, which we are here calling modernization, right? In part, the teams understand that there will be some reshaping of what they are, the ways that they are grouped, so that they are chasing after bits of value, bits of business goals that make sense in today's objectives. How then does an organization get started on that process? And I guess we'll all have bits to add, but should we start with you, Anikh?
Yeah, okay. So there's probably a few different perspectives there, and I won't sort of take Ray's thunder from the tech perspective, because he's the specialist there. So we'll sort of hand over to him for those. But I think for me, ideally, and this is a bit of sort of a high level view, you want to take a MVP type approach to this as well. Bit trickier, I think, with modernizing Monolith, because of so much stuff being intertwined and dependent and tightly coupled. But just thinking about where you can carve out a slice or an end-to-end piece, or maybe an increment, maybe it's a section, maybe it's not end-to-end, but maybe it's a separate module component that you're going to focus on and iterate on first. That's a good place to start. And I think depending on the scale of the modernization, we may then have a way of working or a process where that's the main focus, and that's the sort of the key, kind of key priority for teams. until you get to a point where it's continuous improvement. But then that needs to be baked into the same planning processes, the same backlog of work that a team has, because they need to have a single source of truth for everything they're doing. So whatever work that team is doing needs to be fully understood, and everyone needs to be aligned on, all in one place, one location, one planning session, all the rest of it. So for me, that's a key thing. And I think that also lends itself to the people side, where people are a bit more, or people may be a bit more motivated and keen to work on some of those areas, because they're doing a mixture of that. They get that variety. Some people, of course, will prefer sort of just that core focus around modernizing. Some people prefer the core focus on the opposite end of the spectrum. But having the options and the variety means that you're reducing the chances of attrition, where people become frustrated with the lack of ability to build code in the most efficient way because of technical challenges and sort of legacy tech and that kind of thing. So having the opportunity to make sure that people are working on different things and working on the things they want to be doing that's aligned with their own personal goals and motivations, I think is a recipe for at least beginning the success of a modernization journey. But that's kind of my high level, I guess, view. But Ray, what about your perspective from the actual ins and outs of breaking that down and getting started?
Yeah, I think in the ins and outs in the tech part of kind of modernizing, there's a few things, and it all starts with a combination of the three of us, but it all starts with understanding what does the architecture of tomorrow look like, and what is our plan for getting there. And that's got to take into account, the sort of product vision. It's got to take into account org structure. It's got to take into account any sort of maybe domain mapping exercises you might do, and it's that whole piece of structuring all of your teams to kind of match up with for me a product led, kind of outcome led, a real fun thing for a team to chew into over a long period of time. I'm a strong believer in those teams, and you'll hear me talk about them a lot as we go through this. Getting into the nuts and bolts of it, it's then evaluating the tech stack, seeing what works, what doesn't. It's evaluating the requirements and seeing what works, what doesn't. And then looking at your system architecture, right? You may still have an organization that effectively is okay to run in a monolith, that really actually it needs updating, it needs love, it needs better testing, it needs to be able to maybe modularize elements of the testing, maybe modularize elements of the deployment, but actually it still makes sense for us to be a monolithic application, because the business is one product. I can think of a couple examples, but I think my favorite, even though they just bought something and that makes them two products, which is very annoying, but was Notion up until a long time ago, right? Which is one of my many note-taking apps, and anyone who's worked with me will know that I use about 7, and none of them particularly effectively. But Notion had one core business, which was to be a productivity / note-taking app for people. And that may very well be a monolithic application, because why would you need to split that out into lots of microservices, when effectively actually the quickest way for all of us to ensure something gets done is to all work in the same code base, to be cross-functional, to go up and down the stack as engineers, and to be able to work together. Other businesses, you may look at, many. I was going to pick Google.
Say Google. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one I was going to pick as well. Again, we need to stop agreeing. But like Google have many, 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 many services, many offerings, many, many value adds, right? Search is very different from calendar, is very different from
YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah, definitely different from YouTube. So that's a different model. That's a different architecture model for your business. And actually this comes back to what is your architecture level at the organization, kind of flight level, as it were, rather than what is your architecture view at the team level or at the individual product level. Because once you've done that, you can start then getting into the fun debates of, should we go down a microservice pattern? Should we stay in a monolithic pattern? Should we go somewhere in between? Do we want pub sub? Do we want events? Do we want a service oriented architecture, etc.? There's loads of fun conversations, but it starts with understanding where your organization structure lies and then going deeper from there. And then I can talk for hours about what teams should do in front end and back end and databases and all the rest of it, but I'm going to choose not to. I'll save that. Yeah, we'll save that for a later podcast where I come on here for an hour and debate the beauties of Postgres and Mongo. It's not going to happen. I don't think anyone would let it happen, but one day. But Ollie, what about you? Where is your head after?
Save that for a beer in the pub.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's so much truth through both of what you've both said. And it all comes back to, although there might be a moment of being stuck, a moment of being constrained by the tech estate that is and that has been built up until this point, and the teams and the way they are structured and the ways that they work, there are a number of different ways to approach that, and they differ based on what the organization is setting out to achieve. And I think that's a really good point, because if you are at Notion and they've just and they've got this, as you were saying, that might be a monolithic code base, and then they've bought something else, and let's say they buy a business in AI, or they buy a business in calendars, or something like that, right?
They just did. They just bought a calendar application, which is why it was annoying as an example.
Totally. And it's a really good calendar app. I actually use it at home with Notion now. So well done, Notion. Good purchase, well made. But of course, when you come to integrate that stack, there's questions there, right? Does it need to be integrated? Are they talking quite nicely to each other already? And do the two teams work in domain areas, to your point, Anikh, quite happily, because it's suitable for them to have those silos of information as long as they work really well together. And I think, to me, it's what we're really saying here is understand that that big bang projects, just ask the UK government, right? It's really hard to go and spend £1 billion on something on the NHS, say NHSX, with the Universal Data Record. It's a huge project. It's really easy for that to go off the rails in a number of areas. But understand that that's not the only way that things can be achieved. And as you were saying, Ray, there's a number of different ways to split the problem of improving the way that our technology is structured and the way that data flows in and out and through the organization. And maybe understanding more that the ways that people are working are changing. And perhaps the way that we're talking about modernization is quite similar to the ways that, Anikh, you might talk to teams about general operating structure and the model of teams, given that their business has changed as it's moved to a remote business back to a hybrid business. If you know what I mean, there's a number of themes here. But I think what's most important is to understand that these are discussions that need to be had. And if I was to highlight anything for the product team in considering the path to modernization and the need to modernize the stack, it would be, I see product as perhaps more than a number of other areas of a business responsible for communicating and listening and repeating. and that's the thing, right? Talking to the delivery team and saying, I see we're stuck. How are we stuck? What have you observed? Talking to the engineering team and saying, what could we do about this? What do you think? Involving the team and the decision making. Anikh, you're absolutely right. People enjoy working on things when they get involved, and it might not be some kind of utopia where everybody gets to decide what they want to do, but it might be something along the lines of, hey, now that we know that we've got to do something about identity, we've got to do something about APIs, and we've got to do something about our partners and how we work with them. Who's interested in that area? It's a good starting point, right?
Yeah, it's a great starting point. And I think kind of I let us in at the top, and I'll happily do a little bit of my exec summary of what I think, and then I'll let Anikh really cap us off with his views. But for me, it's taking a minute and a beat. it's matching your overall organizational system architecture with your product vision and your org structure. It's creating, the right number of product led teams or outcome led teams, and giving them the space to be autonomous, giving them the space to own those outcomes or to own those products and move them forward. It is, doing those, and while they're doing those domain mapping exercises, really understanding who you are as a business and what you're doing, and matching your engineering, product, and delivery functions together, because they are not separate. They really are all one and the same, of looking to improve and create and make cool features, as it were. It is setting, from an engineering perspective, it's setting standards, organizational level standards, engineering level standards of everything is well tested. These are our rules for linting. These are our rules for languages. These are our rules for frameworks. Just setting the, a lot of people call it the golden path or the easy path or the right path, etc. But setting a path for those autonomous teams to follow, so that you now have a set of standards and a group of people that can move in between those areas and cross skill and be cross functional between your different product and outcome led areas. And lastly, as you're going about your modernizing, which is maybe the most important one, it's setting that strategy, that vision to get there, and understanding that this is a continuous improvement journey, that the end goal is to be, delivering every day, or delivering every 10 minutes, or delivering every minute, or whatever it might be. It's to be doing that with lots of confidence and quality, and to ensure that, you're not delivering anything that will ultimately break the customer experience. It's ensuring that, you're monitoring and that when something goes wrong. That's the end goal, but it's baby steps getting there, and it's continuous improvement getting there. And you don't have to put everything down. You can still build features. You can still create more value while you're doing that. You just have to do so in a structured way with a strategy and an end goal, and continuously mark yourself against it. And that's where I'm going to kind of pivot to Anikh and talk and say, that's something that you certainly will have seen, is how do you mark yourself against that? How do you ensure your teams are autonomous? How do you kind of empower them in that delivery space to be autonomous, but also communicate across those lines and communicate with other teams and work in one organization together, as you ultimately move towards this end goal of being really awesome, which is what I call it. Modernizing's boring. Being really awesome is way better.
That's good. That's what we should have called this, actually. So yeah, no, I think completely agree with that. I think it's a really good summary, actually, of where we've got to, and I think our sort of key takeaways, if you like, on this topic. But just one thing I'll sort of mention at the end there is the criteria, and a good perspective to have is to not allow, or to try and prevent, I should say, the external customers and users of your product or service seeing and understanding your internal structure, whether it be technical structure or sort of organizational structure of teams. And where organizations will have some of these silos which are built up over time, often, and I remember I was working at somewhere previously where users would be able to literally see the different teams that we have in our department based on the menu, the navigation menu we had on our website. So we literally had a different team for each option on our menu. And the customers shouldn't, and the user should not care about that internal structure, and sort of, the way that you've architected yourselves. It should just be very much end-to-end user journeys, and that's it. And the technology behind it should be seamless enough to be able to support those that are relevant. So I think that's a key criterion. And I think the other piece, just around understanding what criteria you're aiming for and how to embed some of those ways of working within teams. It's kind of keeping tabs on the health of teams as you would with the health of a code base. So the level of autonomy, the amount of change they're able to influence and impact, the right skills and capabilities being a team, all the sort of the typical things that you would look to assess and understand and keep sort of your finger on the pulse with your teams, I think applies to this, as well.
Yeah, nicely put. Nicely put. So it's kind of an opportunity, a call to arms to take a moment out and take a look at the business and the state of the business, the objectives that the leadership team have identified, listen to the teams in terms of the current state of the stack, observe the ways that teams are currently working and the silos that are working, the silos that are not, and then synthesize those things or group those things together in a way that maps a sensible and practical way forward. And there's, of course, a lot of ways to even organize the teams, isn't there? It might be that for a platform-based business having of a certain size, having a platform-based team that supports a number of other teams who work in different geos, for example, that might work really well. And other businesses, it won't, because as Anikh was saying, you might need just a vertical slice and also an end-to-end slice of vertically through the stack and then end-to-end through the customer journey. And I think that probably brings us to a natural point. What do you think, chaps? All right.
So,
I think everybody's probably heard enough of us now. It's about an hour.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. So thank you, Ray and Anikh, for today's team takeover. Thank you, listeners. If you've got a burning topic that you'd like us to discuss on the show, if you'd like to try and find a way for us to disagree, let us know in the comments, particularly on Spotify and YouTube. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the 101 Ways podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Look after yourselves.